Hey guys, this is chapter 2, section 4, I believe, and this section is going to be all about arrays and loops. So let's start with arrays. An array is pretty much global to all programming languages. What an array is it's basically a container to hold more than one variable. So we can give an array a name and it can have as many values as we want. So I'm going to start out with just creating a simple array. It's going to be called my numbers. So to assign values to our array, we're going to just say equals, and then arrays will always be in these brackets. All of our values that we want to be in the my numbers array will be in these brackets. So I'm just going to put some random numbers. Okay, so now if we press enter, we'll see it just shows us our array that we just created. So each of these is a value or an index for the my numbers array, and each value or number or index or whatever you want to call it, each one has a position number. And one thing, if you're going to take one thing from this section, it's that arrays start at 0. The first index or the first value of any array is always in the position 0. So it goes 0, 1, 2, 3, 4. It's not 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. So always remember that. It's very important. So now we can actually call and find a value by its position. So we can do that. Let's just print out on the screen the my numbers array, and then we have these brackets, and then in the middle is where we put our position. So like I said, they start at 0, so if we put 0, it's going to be 12, because 12 is it's the first position and it's at 0. If we do print my numbers, and then we want, let's say the 2, position 2, it's going to give us 22, which is the third one, because it goes 0, 1, 2. Okay, so it's very important to remember that arrays and most other things in programming usually start at 0. Alright, so an array is also an object, so we can use object methods on it. So for instance, we can say my numbers dot sort. So the object is my numbers, it's an array, it's an object, and then sort is a method which does something. What it does is sort the array. And you'll see it gives us the array, it gives us the array sorted. So it goes, it's numerically increasing. And we can use other methods as well. Let's say my numbers dot reverse, because reverse is another method. It gives us the array with the values reversed. So it starts at 33 here, ends at 33 here. And we can actually also just print out the entire array. And that'll just print out all the values in the array. Now arrays aren't limited to integers or numbers. We can also use strings. So for instance, let's say states. And here we're going to be using state abbreviations, which are going to be strings. So for strings, we have to use double quotes. Okay, so we'll say Mass, New Hampshire, Connecticut. I'll just do all the New England states. Rhode Island, Vermont, and Maine. So, and enter. So now we have an array called states, which holds these 6 states, the abbreviations. And we can do the same thing. We can print all of them. We can print from a position, let's say 1. The array name would help. States 1. And it gives us New Hampshire, which is the second one, but remember it's 0, 1. So I'm going to clear this out, and now I want to show you something called hashes. And If you've had experience with PHP and some other languages, they don't. Instead, they have associative arrays, but they're basically the same thing. It's like an array, except it doesn't only have a value. It doesn't only have multiple values, but it also has keys with the values. So let me show you an example. Let's create a hash called user. And instead of using brackets like we would with an array, we're going to use curly braces. So in here we want to define our key value pairs. So let's create a key called first name, and you should be able to use double quotes if you want. Now the key, we need to point the key to the value, so we're going to use the equal sign and then the greater than sign. And remember, these are strings, so we need quotes. So first name, we'll say John. So that's a key value pair. If we want to add more, we put a comma, and then we just add more. So let's say last name. Last name will be Smith. Okay. Was the other curly brace? Did I delete it? Looks like I deleted the other one. So make sure those are wrapped in curly braces and press enter. Now you can see we have a hash. It created a hash with two key value pairs. Now to print out a certain value, it's a little funny because you don't use the curly braces when printing. You print it like it's an array value. So we would say print user, and then we'd have brackets like it was an array, and then we would put the key in. So first name, and it prints out John. So that's how you print out individual values, keys, and values. And we can also use methods on a hash. So we could say user sort, and it'll sort it alphabetically. And what else could we do? We could get the size. We could do user.size, and it tells us we have two key value pairs. Now we can also actually create an array and have hashes as each value. So let me give you an example. Let's create, we'll call it user again, but we're going to change it. We're going to make user an array. Alright, so in the array we're going to have two values, and each one of those values is going to be a hash. So for the first value, we're going to create a hash with the curly braces like we did above, and we'll say for the hash key is first name, and I'll space it out so you guys can see it better. First name will be John again. Alright, and now we're still in the hash, so the second key value in the hash will be last name, and we'll give that a value of Smith. Just remember to use the quotes. So now what we have here is an array called user, and we have one value in the array, which is a hash, which has two key value pairs in that one array value. It's a little intimidating at first, but it's actually really simple when you really think about it. So let's give this array another value of another hash. So in this hash, we'll have, again, first name. And this time, the first name will be Brad. And comma to separate the next key value pair of the hash. And we'll call this last name. And we'll give it my last name, Traversy, and that should be it for this. So remember, we have an array called users with two values, and each value is a hash that has two key value pairs. Let me just flip this over, and we shouldn't have two curly braces right here. Did I miss it over here? Yeah, I didn't attach the ending curly brace on the first hash. Alright, so that should be good. Alright, so let's run that. And now it looks like we have the hashes in the array. So we can call this, let's say, user and position 0. So position 0 gives us the hash, the John Smith hash. We can say user 1, and it gives us the Brad hash. All right. If we did user 3, or user 2 rather, it gives us nothing because we don't have a third position in that array. All right. So that's the basics for arrays and hashes. We're running out of time here, so I want to jump right into loops. A loop is basically a block of code that you want to run a certain amount of times. And I will show you some examples. Let's just clear this. Now you can clear it with system, with the system method, and just pass an argument of CLS, and that should clear your interactive Ruby screen. So I'd like to start with showing you the times method, which is a looping method. So we could say 5.times. Remember, 5 is a number, which is an object which has methods, so it has the times method. 5.times do puts, we use double quotes here, and we'll say this is an awesome series, okay, and then end. And you'll see it types it out 5 times. Now this might look a little weird to you if you used other programming languages, this do and end, but if this confuses you, all you have to think of, which you can actually use in Ruby as well, is do is the opening curly brace and end is the closing curly brace. So we could do, instead of do, just put an opening curly brace, and then in place of end put the closing curly brace, and it does the same thing. And remember, puts is just a command that'll tell us to print it out to the screen, so that's what it did. And we also have a method called up to, which will reiterate something up to a certain amount. So let's start with 3. Okay, so on 3, which is an integer, which is an object, we can do the up to method, and this method takes one argument, and that's the number that you want to go up to. So we'll say 10. Alright, so we get 3 up to 10. So that's what we want to run, whatever we put in between these curly braces. And remember, you could also use do and end instead of the curly braces, but I prefer these over the do and end. So what do we want to do from 3 to 10? Well, let's just put, let's count. Okay, so enter, and you'll see what it did is it started at 3 and went up to 10. So 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. So it's basically 7. You know, 3 to 10 is obviously 7. So that's another method we could use to do loops. So we also have a down to method. So if we go over here and change this to down to, we'll change this to a 9. We'll say 9 down to 2. Okay. So now it goes from 9, 8, 7, 6, 5, 4, 3, 2. So that's the down to method. So if you have any other programming language experience, then you probably know what a while loop is. And it just says, while something is true, execute this block of code. So let me give you a simple example. So we want to say why. Actually, first we want to define some variables. We're going to define x as 0, and then we're going to have a variable called limit, which will give the value of 7. So we have two variables, x, which is 0, and limit, which is 7. So now we're going to say while x is less than limit. Okay, so if we do this, while x is less than limit, you can see this change to a 1. That means we're inside the loop. Okay, so in the loop, we just want to echo out, puts out the x, the value of x. Alright, so while x is less than 7, then print out x. Now, we want to increase x, or else it's going to be an infinite loop, because x is always going to be less than 7 as it is 0. So what we want to do is increase x by 1 every iteration. So we're going to say x plus equals 1. So what the plus equals does is it just brings it up just 1, and it'll do that every iteration through the loop. So, and now we just want to end. Alright, so if we hit enter, this is what happened. It printed out the value of x all the way up to 6 because we have a limit of 7. Okay, and we want it while x is less than 7. That's why it doesn't even have the 7, because it's less than. It's not less than or equal to. And again, it always starts at 0. So that's a simple while loop. So there's one more loop that I want to show you, and that's the each loop. And it's used for looping through array values. So I'm going to actually clear my screen. Alright, so the first thing we want to do the each statement is actually create an array. So I'm just going to create an array called planets, which will hold strings. So we'll say Earth, Saturn, Mars, and Mercury. Okay, so we have an array of planets. Now, what we want to use the each loop for is to go through and get each value and display it on the screen. So we're going to say planets.each. Alright, and then we're going to have curly braces, and in the curly braces we're going to create a variable x, which we need to put in between two pipes. So a pipe is the key that's above the enter key on your keyboard, and in between there we're going to give it an x. Alright, and now here is what we will put what we want to do with it, what we want to happen, and we just want to put x. So here x is taking the place for each value. Okay, so now if we press enter, it does what we said, puts x. So at the first value is Earth. Okay, that's x then. Then the next iteration is Saturn, and then Mars, and then Mercury. So that's how we can actually grab arrays and go through each value and execute code dealing with only the single values of the array. So I think that's a good place to stop. That's the basics of arrays and hashes and loops, but we will definitely be revisiting these things, these aspects of Ruby throughout the rest of the series. So next up we have objects and classes, so I will see you in that video.